Joining me, as she always does, every week from Fox Sports, All the Smoke, Monumental Sports Network, and fresh off what I'm sure was a grueling assignment in Necker Island, the great Rachel Nichols.
Yeah. When someone says, would you like to come to our private island to work for the week? We will pay you to come here and be in the tropics. The answer should be yes, is what I'm telling you. This is my learned experience.
Yeah, I would too. If someone invited me to, say, like Grand Cayman for a week to, cover pickleball or whatever was going on down there, I'd be all for it.
This was, a lot of pickleball, which, by the way, I never played before. Have you ever played?
I have not played. I've seen them. Like, I'm in New York City right now, and I was walking by MSG earlier in the day, and right along, I think it's 33rd Street, there is a huge pickleball venue right there. So it's everywhere now. It's a big deal.
People love it. This was a sports business sort of gathering, and then pickleball was sort of what people were doing when they weren't having these cool discussions about things going on in the business. That was my part, not the pickleball part, but I did pick up a pickleball racket and try to play a little bit. That's probably not even how you say it, pickleball paddle. Excuse me, all the pickle heads out there. And I also got to pet a baby kangaroo because it's Richard Branson's island and he has a baby kangaroo, because if you're a billionaire, you can do such things. So I got to play with a baby kangaroo.
It's nice to own an island and be able to stock it
this week.
Stock it like it's Jurassic Park. I'm down for that.
I think people in the comments should write us what they would, if they own their own island, what animal they would bring to play with them, because I would like to know. I think baby kangaroo now tops my list.
Yeah, kangaroos up there. I've been, not to go completely off track, but I've seen the swimming pigs in where is it? In Georgetown, Bahamas. In there, I've been with them. Those are pretty cool to witness. But we'll have to think on that, and we'll reconvene on that subject next week. All right, we have to start by talking about the Dallas Mavericks, who have been just snake bitten over these last few weeks. In the aftermath of the Anthony Davis trade, Davis went down for multiple weeks after playing just one game for this team. And now, more catastrophically, Kyrie Irving is out for the rest of this season, probably a significant chunk of next season as a result of tearing his ACL. Yeah, I mean, I guess, it all depends on his recovery time, but he tore his ACL in a game earlier in the week, and now the Mavericks are down to basically a bare bones team. We're talking now publicly about Anthony Davis shutting it down potentially for the rest of the season. I know on social, Rachel, you had a pretty strong take about this Kyrie injury, specifically pointing to the minutes load that he has been on really since the Luka Doncic trade. Kyrie Irving has been the most played player in the NBA, during the post-Luka stretch. Just explain that. Explain why you feel so strongly that Kyrie's minutes contributed to this injury.
Well, it's funny. I would not use the word snake bitten like you just did, because I think there are factors around the team that didn't necessarily cause either of these injuries, Anthony Davis or Kyrie Irving, but created an environment where they may have been more likely to happen. And this is obviously a thing. The Dallas Mavericks in particular have told us it's a thing, that you can create an environment where injuries are more or less likely to happen, because that's one of the reasons they gave for trading Luka. They said that his poor habits created him not being as healthy and well-conditioned enough that injuries were more likely to happen. And they were worried that he was going to become more and more injured in a way that would be detrimental to the team down the road. So not only am I familiar with this concept, I know the Mavericks are familiar with this concept. And when you have something like an ACL injury, it's not an overuse injury. I want to make it clear. I am not saying that he played so many minutes, he wore himself down, and this became an overuse injury. But I know for a fact that and you know it too, Chris, when your body is tired, everything is different. I'm talking about reams of scientific studies of your reaction time slows, your ability to absorb contact changes, the way your muscles react changes when you are exhausted. And you cannot tell me that at Kyrie Irving, who is a smaller guard at his age on the other side of 30, with a significant injury history, should have been playing the most minutes in the entire league for the last 6 weeks straight. Not in a league where Tom Thibodeau exists. You should not have had Kyrie Irving being the one who plays the most minutes. So I am not saying that Kyrie Irving tore his ACL because of an overuse injury. I understand how ACLs work. But I also know that when your body is exhausted, you create conditions for to become hurt more easily. And any medical trainer will tell you that. And that is what I am talking about. And Anthony Davis, by the way, the dirty little secret is he probably should not have come back from the previous injury that he had because he was out from the Lakers as quickly as he did. And he was out on the court at a time he probably shouldn't have been because he was trying to prove the trade right. He was trying to help Nico, not out of the goodness of his heart, but just because if you were on the other end of that trade and everyone's saying, man, Dallas got hosed, well, you're the one who they're saying isn't good enough. So you want to get out there and show how good you are and show that this was a good deal and show that you guys can go and win a title together. And that short window is okay. So he came back earlier than he should, which again created conditions to make it more likely that he got hurt. So neither of these injuries was inevitable, but I'm also saying that neither of these injuries was completely impossible to even conceive could happen because the conditions were created to make injuries more likely. And again, I know the Mavericks know that this is possible because it's one of the justifications they created for trading Luka in the first place.
However it happened,
I mean, do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I don't feel like I know. I don't feel like I know enough. I mean, I think there's room for multiple arguments about why it happened, right? Like to your point, you don't believe that it happened like in that moment because he was on minute 36 in that game or whatever it was. It is, there are contributing factors to your point, most certainly. But however it happened, I can't recall a more devastating stretch in all of professional sports for one franchise.
No.
To trade away the then 25-year-old superstar who just took you to the finals, who was a top 3 player in the NBA, and in the same month span, lose your other franchise guard for at minimum 9 months. Like this is a 9 to 12 month injury recovery time. So we're talking probably at the earliest all-star break next year before Kyrie Irving comes back to the Mavericks rotation. At that point, as we've seen with many guys coming off ACL injuries, Jamal Murray comes to mind. There is a curve coming back. Like you don't just come back as the same player. So right now, the Mavericks, who were very public about the fact that when they traded Luka, they felt like they were opening up a 3 to 4 year window. And I would argue it's most probably 3, given the ages of those stars. That they were opening up.
That included this season.
Right, including this season, a 3 to 4 year window. Now this season is bust. Next season, it's looking very unlikely that they can get it together. And after that, who knows? Like, who knows if Kyrie Irving is the same player that he once was coming back from this injury? Does he have the same burst? Does he have the same confidence in that knee? It's not a 25-year-old coming back from this injury. It's a soon-to-be 33-year-old that's coming back from this injury. Moreover, like now the Mavericks front office, led by Nico Harrison, who is just, got to be turtling in his office right now. Like, they've got to decide what to pay this guy. Like, he's extension eligible next summer or this summer. Do you give him an extension and roll the dice that knee is going to hold up, but he's going to be able to be the same player for the next 3 or 4 years? Do you let him go into the contract year and say, prove it? And if it works out, we'll sign you to a new deal next summer. I mean, this is catastrophic in every possible way. This is and when you throw in the fact they were in the finals last June, like this is the most shocking fall from grace than I could ever remember.
But again, they created the conditions for this to happen, which is why I would not say snake bitten. I'm not saying it was inevitable that this happened, but the conditions they created, which was going away, they shortened their own window. He got up in the press conference and said, we have decided to shorten our own window, which is something I have never heard before in professional sports. They decided to shorten their own window by betting on 2 players over the age of 30 with significant injury histories. That is not a condition that just happened to them. That is not a bad luck of the draw. That was a decision. They had won the lottery with Luka Doncic, literally. And yet they decided, we don't need it. We want a shorter window with 2 players who are more injury prone, who are older, who if they do get injured will have, to your point, longer recovery times, less ability to bounce back. I think you're right. I think it's the most devastating month that I can remember in pro sports for a franchise and its fan base. But the difference is this didn't happen to them. They created the conditions for this to happen. They took risks knowing that this had a larger chance of happening than when they started the month. And that's the thing that I can't get over. For again, I don't know Patrick Dumont. I really don't. I've met him once or twice. I don't know the family at large, the Adelson family at large. Again, I've met her once, but I know Nico Harrison. He's a smart guy. He's the one that made all the trades that we were praising in the NBA Finals last year and when they won the Western Conference so handily. He's a smart man. Jason Kidd is someone I have a lot of respect for in basketball. So I just don't understand why you would set yourself up for these conditions that made the situation they're in not inevitable, but more likely. And here we are.
Yeah. So now the question is, what's the play? Like, to what I was alluding to earlier, like, do you give Kyrie a contract, that he wants? Or do you roll the dice and, hope he comes back next year? You can re-sign him in the summer of 2026. Like, I mean, I've seen some suggestions. Our buddy, Tim Bontemps over ESPN suggested that they trade AD this summer. AD's got 2 more guaranteed years left in his contract after this one. Like, do you think it's possible Anthony Davis has played the one game he's ever going to play in Dallas, in which case would make this an even wilder story down the line?
I mean, I don't think Nico Harrison can trade Anthony Davis with everything else that he has already done. I think there's a little bit of in for a penny here, but I do understand what Tim is saying. I don't think Tim is crazy. I've heard people in the fan base saying the same thing. The theory is, and I'm not saying this is what I would do, but Tim's theory and the theory of some of the fans that we've seen online say is, look, Anthony Davis is never going to have more trade value than he will this summer. And that you basically don't have the setup that you wanted. You were betting on this 3-year window, let's call it. Year 1 is done. Year 2 is likely done. So you are basically, if you keep AD, betting on the fact that in year 3, everything is going to go right for you to win a title. You are betting on a 1-year window with 2 guys who are now closer to 35.
Well, that year three, Kyrie would be close to 35. AD would be close to 34. So they're right. That is, they're.
So that is why by keeping, I mean, that's the thing. It sounds crazy when you say it out loud. Oh my God, trade AD this summer. And by the way, this is part of why, again, you don't get into this position in the first place. But now that we're here, I'm not sure I would do it, but I get the line of thought. Play it out for me. What's the best case scenario? Chris, what's the bet? If you're Nico Harrison and you're trying to sell the fan base on, look, this isn't as bad, or this is our plan, what's the best case scenario? It's not to win this year. That's impossible, right? It's not to win next year, unless they pull off some other trade that I don't even know is possible because half their assets are not more than that. So it's not really possible next year. You're going to get half a year of Kyrie. And to your point, he's not going to be Kyrie Irving. He's going to be working my way back Irving. And by the way, who's to say Anthony Davis doesn't get hurt for a chunk of next season too? Because again, he's getting older and has a significant injury history and is a big man. And we know that obviously sometimes has its own set of things to deal with physically. So what's the play if you were trying to say, I'm going to keep Anthony Davis and we are going to win when and how? What's the scenario where that becomes true? The end of that sentence.
The best case scenario is the 2026-2027 season. That is the best case scenario.
35-year-old Kyrie and a 34-year-old AD?
That's the best case scenario. There's no other way to look at it. Like
is that the scenario that you would bet on, or would you trade AD and start rebuilding? Because
I would say this,
options, right?
I don't like to advocate for anybody getting fired, but Nico Harrison can't be the guy that rebuilds this team. You can't trade away Luka Doncic and say, well, it didn't work. Let me trade away Anthony Davis and get a picks package that is a fraction of what Luka Doncic would have fetched and be the one to rebuild it. That can't be what happens there. I think if you're Nico Harrison, you've got to continue to double down. Like you've got to either, give Kyrie maybe a shorter extension. Maybe it's a 2-year extension instead of a 3-year one or whatever they were going to negotiate this summer. And you cross your fingers, hope he comes back earlier than expected next year, hope that they stay healthy going into 2026 when Derek Lively is a year older, some of the other young pieces that they have there still around, still contributing. Look, I don't buy any of it, right? Like, I don't believe this. I'm giving you the possibility, but I don't believe it to be realistic. But that's all Nico Harrison could do, because if you do tear it down, the people in Dallas aren't going to let you do it. You can't be the one to do it after you traded their hero, their god, raise ticket prices, which is something else they tried
I mean,
to do.
that's another just I mean, that's where I get back to, I don't understand what they're doing. You absolutely cannot look at a fan base you have just devastated and say, oh, by the way, it's now going to be more expensive to walk in the building, because newsflash, they're not going to walk in the building then. It's not just you're hurting them, you're hurting yourself. There is a point. Everyone has a breaking point, right? People will not pay $1 million a game to go see the Mavericks, right? So you can just work your way down from there. Maybe they'll pay X, maybe they'll pay Y, but they're not going to pay $1 million. So you can keep going down from there, and maybe 8% higher, which is what we're talking about, is the breaking point for a lot of people who are already disillusioned by this franchise. And I agree with you, Nico can't be the one to rebuild it. But if I owned the Dallas Mavericks, if I wasn't Nico, who had to double down to keep his job, but if I was the owner of the franchise, or if you made if you did the Green Bay model and made the fans the owners for the day or the year or the season or whatever, I don't know if the sunken cost of having made this trade is the justification for now ruining the next 3 years of your franchise, or whether you just have to acknowledge what we all knew the night at 11 p.m., Chris, that trade for Luka was a huge mistake. Sending him away was a huge mistake. And the Piper, I guess, is coming to call earlier than we thought. But I think the Piper is coming to call, man. I don't see the scenario where this you work your way out of this.
Man, think about what that game and atmosphere is going to be like next month when Luka comes back to town. Like, the Mavericks might not win a game going into that game. Like, they might be on like a 10 or 11 game losing streak or whatever it may be. Like, they're going to be, one of the worst teams, I think, in the NBA record wise at that point.
Yeah,
then Luka comes to town with
it's just going to be very sad, don't you?
Yeah, but Luka's going to come down.
It's going to be a beatdown. The Lakers are going to win by 30. I mean,
Luka's coming to town with the suddenly white-hot Lakers. Who knows what they'll be? Maybe they'll take a step back in the next couple of weeks.
You are such a doubter, man. We're gonna.
Me and Jovan Buha did this to the last one, so we'll keep this relatively Lakers-free. But this is a big stretch coming up for them. They've got the Celtics coming up again. They've got the Knicks coming up again. I think they've got the Bucks coming up again. This is where we see exactly what the Lakers are. If they get through that, hey, JJ Redick, Coach of the Year. Sign me up for that vote right there. But I think going into that Mavericks game, you're going to see a Lakers team backed by Luka thriving, and a Mavericks team that was in the finals less than a year ago, just in absolute shambles. It's going to be quite the scene there. All right, let's talk about a team that right now is thriving. That's the Cleveland Cavaliers. Became the first team to clinch a playoff spot this week. That means they're guaranteed to be a top 6 team, avoiding the play-in. Everything is going right now for Cleveland. They lead the NBA in offensive rating. They're 7th in defensive rating. They're number 1 in three-point percentage. Basically, you name it, they are right up there in the statistical category. They have been kicking the crap out of the Western Conference, 17-3 against the West. They just won a game in Boston where they were down 23 early in that game. They have won 36 games this season by double digits. DeAndre Hunter has come in and he has been lights out from 3, 52% in his first 10 games. I have been in the past a little bit skeptical about what the Cavs can do against a team like Boston, because I've looked at the small backcourt and said, all right, that's kind of exploitable. I've looked at the 2 non-3-point shooting bigs in the front court. I've said, all right, that's somewhat exploitable by teams. But I tell you, Rachel, watching the Cavs this week, specifically that game against Boston, I'm starting to come around here on the Cleveland Cavaliers. I tell you, mostly because I think DeAndre Hunter was one of the best trades of the deadline. I think getting him has the potential to be a game changer for the Cavs in the playoffs. I mean, look at what they are doing down the stretch of games. You're not seeing the 2 bigs out there as often, right? They're choosing between Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Mostly it's Mobley. And then they're playing, 4 versatile guys that can play on the wing. DeAndre Hunter, I mentioned 52% from 3 since he joined the Cavaliers. He is a big, solid 6'7" type guy who can play multiple different positions. Getting him, to me, that all of a sudden might give them an edge in a series against Boston. What is your kind of viewpoint of the Cavaliers right now?
Well, I think the Cavaliers are excellent. I've been saying that for months. I have a lot of confidence in them. I always think with any team, being a team that hasn't been in a conference finals, then going over to win a title is very hard. We've just seen that historically, unless you have the kind of trade where you're bringing in a really A-level veteran like a Kawhi Leonard, who, has been a finals MVP, to come in and take your team in Toronto to a place it hasn't been. And even that team, a chunk of them have been in the conference finals before. So I just think it is very hard to take a team that has none of that level of experience and win. It's not impossible, but I think that is the only flaw I can see in the Cavaliers. But then it becomes, who are they playing, right? So are they playing Oklahoma City? And Oklahoma City is really tough, man. I mean, I think Oklahoma City, I'll be interested to see sort of down the line as we go here, Oklahoma City and Cleveland. I think they've got a game coming up. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Next week?
No, they played. Didn't they already play twice?
Or did they play twice? All right.
Yeah.
There's another game next week that's one of these. How are these 3 or 4 teams going to match up? Excuse me that I have the wrong one. But anyway, I'm curious to see when Oklahoma City and the Cavs meet again. And we've obviously saw the Thunder win when it was at home in OKC. And Boston, if you look at that matchup, there was no Drew Holiday this week. And I think that Drew Holiday is going to be a huge key to whether we say, the edge is to the Cavs or the edge is to the Celtics. Because obviously he was a huge part of them winning the title last year. KP is going to be a huge part of the conversation with this matchup. Drew Holiday, if his defensive skills are out there, Donovan Mitchell is not abusing, the Celtics the way he did. There is a point of attack that he had in that game. I feel bad. I don't want to start, picking on anyone, but we know where it was. And he's not going to have that with Drew Holiday. The question, though, is it's a finger injury with Drew Holiday. And is he going to be able to shoot at a level that they'll need him to shoot to run their offense the way they need to run it?
What are they calling it? They're calling it mallet finger. Like, I love the NBA. Every so often they come up with a new injury that I never heard of. Like Drew Holiday's got mallet finger. I'm like,
mallet finger.
Okay.
I don't know. It's Boston. You got to, the crabs, the lobsters, mallet. No, nothing.
Let's not do that.
The worst accent you've ever heard.
Let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's not.
Wait, because you're from, what's your Boston, what's your native accent?
I have spent 20 years away from it.
No, I know. But what is it? Can you give us like a sentence?
I mean, I have to be like 8 beers deep to like start. I just did it right there to start. You start doing that.
To start. All right, maybe we'll. Our friend Howard Beck likes to do the podcasting while drinking pods.
Yes.
So maybe the three of us could do one of those, and we'll see your accent come out as we go.
It'll come roaring back. Every time I go back to Boston and I'm around my family, like my mother will yell something like, "Get the car out of the driveway." I'm like, did I used to sound like that? Was that me?
Yeah. I mean, I've known you for we're a couple decades in. So the answer is yes, but
anyway, like I'm with you on, there still is something to prove for the Cavaliers. There's no doubt about that.
There is. But that's fun, right?
But this Hunter trade, like I loved it. Like the Cavs, they in the weeks before the trade deadline, this was the guy that they targeted. Like this was the guy they were after for a while. Trade. They were negotiating with the Hawks for weeks to do this deal because they knew that this was the kind of round peg, round hole type of fit. I don't think they expected Hunter to shoot 52% from 3, but they did expect it to be, upwards of high 30s, low 40s, whatever, that type of range. And if he can continue to do that and make open shots and keep the pressure off Donovan Mitchell, keep the lanes open for Darius Garland, I mean, that's such a game changer. And when you could play him kind of in that 3-4 slot with some of the other guys they have there and just have Mobley as the 5-man down the stretch, you become a very versatile defensive team. Not that Hunter's a great defender, but you become a versatile defensive team with that type of rotation. And I think that could be really interesting come playoff time with the Cavaliers. So I'm more bullish now on them than I was a few weeks ago. All right, let's talk about the Golden State Warriors, who are absolutely playing out of their minds with Jimmy Butler in the lineup. 9-1 at last check with Butler in the starting lineup. They are outscoring opponents in the Butler era by a pretty massive 13 points per 100 possessions. That's according to Clean the Glass. Overall, they're plus 14.5 points per 100 net rating since that deal. Butler has been what Butler is. He's a guy that puts pressure on the rim. He gets to the free throw line. If you switch onto him with a smaller guy, he punishes them in the low post. They are, Rachel, above water in these non-Steph Curry minutes, which have been a perennial problem with the Golden State Warriors. They thought they were going to be able to address it in the deal that brought Dennis Schroeder to Golden State. That didn't happen with Butler so far. It is happening. I think we both expected Butler to have a positive impact on this team, but did we expect this type of results with Golden State?
Look, we both expected them to be rejuvenated. We both expected Steph to have his level of, I don't want to say level of interest, because Steph Curry has always been interested, always been dedicated, always been moving off the ball. It's not like he has ever cheated the game in any respect, but you can tell. I mean, he's a competitor. He knows when he's got an opening and when he doesn't. And he had no opening before, and now he's got one. So he is absolutely playing at a different level. And you got the old Steph, shimmy Steph back, which has been a lot of fun too. And I knew that Jimmy would give him a little bit of that. I'm not sure I realized how much of a punch that he would give Steph. And an energized, multiplied Steph is a huge, huge thing for them. Jimmy likes to say that he fits into any team basketball-wise, and he is absolutely right. We have seen that. I mean, the irony is they would have rather have had Kevin Durant. That's who they were trying to get, and that Jimmy Butler was a little bit of the consolation prize there. And the fact that Jimmy has done what he has done, I think in a way has shown that he might have been the better fit than KD there, and certainly comes with a lot less baggage in that team. Now, long term, the question with Jimmy is much more long term. It's never been about, does he energize your team when he first gets there? Never. It is about, does, after a couple years with the franchise, do the injuries pile up? Does the attitude pile up? Does the way he approaches the teammates and the game and the organization and the franchise pile up? But no one has ever worried about Jimmy Butler when he first got to a team, and we are seeing the fruit of that labor. And we are also seeing a lot of the West fall apart. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the season, Chris, you and I talking about, oh, the West's so strong. The West hasn't been this strong in years. And, the difference between the West and the East is larger than it's been in a long time. And we've seen that disparity for so long over the years in the NBA. And now it's even worse, that kind of thing. I don't know if that's true anymore. I mean, obviously the bottom of the East is an absolute, puddle of mud, but there's a bunch in the West that isn't great either. And so I think the teams that do have momentum and energy and skill and things going on with them, they are tearing through these other teams.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with Ime Udoka recently about why the Rockets have been so strong in the standings. Like, well, part of it is teams around us haven't been that good. And, that we've seen the Clippers kind of fall off in recent weeks. Memphis, Ja Morant hasn't been what they certainly hoped he would be. So yeah, there's something to that.
Look, here's what's going on with the Warriors. I believe that they're top 5 in offense and defense since the trade.
Yes, during the stretch. Yeah.
And the net with Jimmy is top 3 in the NBA. Yeah. I mean, those are numbers you can't ignore. I know the TV executives are just, they're jonesing for a Lakers Warriors Western Conference Finals. I don't know if we're going to get it. Oklahoma City obviously is going to have a lot to say there. But I know that's what.
You mean they don't want Oklahoma City, Houston in the conference finals? You're telling me that's
just saying that history would say that they are hoping for a Steph, LeBron, Luka conference finals.
I'm curious with the Warriors. Like, again, we were talking about the Lakers briefly about like kind of this upcoming stretch and teams they're going to play. I have the same kind of feeling about Golden State because they've got a stretch of games against teams that on paper should give them some problems. Like the Knicks coming up. That's a team, if Cat is healthy and playing, I want to see how this kind of small ball Warriors lineup matches up with them. Then you've got Denver on that schedule. Nuggets have Jokic. Milwaukee, they play really big. Like the Warriors have had some success, a lot of success with Draymond at the 5 and, playing down a little bit smaller with this group. Is that going to work against some of the bigger teams in the NBA? But there's no question, like Jimmy has invigorated Draymond, who wanted another guy with that chip on his shoulder, just like Draymond has.
That's such a nice way to say it. What did Draymond say, though? He said it the not as nice way. Do you remember?
Yes. He used the a-hole word, I believe, was his choice of words in that one.
The podcast, maybe you can swear.
That's true. We try to keep it clean for the kids. He doesn't compliment Steph in the way that Klay Thompson complimented Steph, but like Jimmy's smart enough to recognize that when Steph Curry's running around the perimeter, his job is to cut. His job is to get into the paint and create offense and put pressure on the rim. Like they are, like I don't know what I don't know the updated numbers, but like rim pressures, like going to the basket, getting to the free throw line, shooting in the paint. Before the Butler trade, the Warriors were way down those categories. Now they're pushing top 10 in those categories. And that's all because of Jimmy Butler, because that's what he does. The 7.5 free throws per game are right up there with some of the better ones in his career. He's figured out his role in this offense, and he's absolutely thriving in it. And look, I think that is going to make them, a really formidable team. If they wind up kind of in that 6-7 range, whether it's through the play-in or otherwise, like nobody's going to want to play that team in the first round. Jimmy Butler gets better in the playoffs. Draymond Green gets better in the playoffs. Steph is Steph, one of the great playoff performers of this generation. Like,
why of all time, Chris? Of all time.
why would Houston or Memphis or Oklahoma City want a piece of that action? Like, why would they want to mess with that team in the first round? I think of the teams that are kind of lingering in the bottom half of the bracket, that to me is the biggest threat. Biggest threat, unquestionably, to the point where, like, hey, the Lakers might play them in the first round. Like, the Lakers right now are camping out at number 2 in the Western Conference standings. What if they want to get Golden State in the first round? That's a matchup that wouldn't go to NBA TV. You'd be getting that on primetime ESPN, ABC. No, not going NBA TV on that.
Only your savvy knowledge of this business, Chris, after so many years covering it, you can make a prediction like that.
Yes, I can predict who is going to NBA TV once the bracket is fully formed. But yeah, I think they're the real deal. Like, this is not an anomaly. Like, what Jimmy Butler has brought is exactly what this team needed, and they're now, I think, a threat to get to the conference finals. I still put Oklahoma City as the best team in the Western Conference right now, but they're a threat to get to the conference finals to compete with them. If they don't have to play them in that first part of the bracket, they're a threat to ultimately get there. A team that is not a threat to get there or really do anything is the Phoenix Suns, who somehow pulled off a come-from-behind win over the Clippers this week, but they are right now on the outside looking in of the playoff field, 11th in the Western Conference standings. There was that viral video where Mike Budenholzer and Kevin Durant were engaged in a not-so-friendly chat in the middle of the game against the Clippers. Both these guys kind of downplayed it, but there certainly is frustration on both sides, players and coaching staff in Phoenix, about the way this season has played out. And now, look, everybody in the league kind of knows that Kevin Durant is going on the block this offseason. Like, I would put the odds.
He's acknowledged it himself, hasn't he?
He has. And I look, I don't think that Golden State's in play again now that they acquired Jimmy Butler, but somebody else will be, whether it's Houston or another team that feels like they're a Kevin Durant away from potentially winning a championship. But like, in the last couple of days since this Kevin Durant opinion has been forming and been talked about ad nauseum, the messaging coming out of Phoenix is that Devin Booker isn't going anywhere. Like, they're not trading Devin Booker. Whatever they do is going to involve rebuilding around Devin Booker. And Rachel, like, to borrow a phrase and to kind of cannibalize it a little bit, methinks they doth protest too much a little bit here. Like, this Devin Booker messaging about how he's 100% going to be there, I'm just not buying it. Like, what deal can you make involving Kevin Durant that brings back pieces that puts you in play for the next couple of years? The reality of their situation is that they desperately need to do a deal with the Houston Rockets. They have to, because the Houston Rockets control a chunk of their draft capital over the next few years. And the Houston Rockets have made it abundantly clear. I was just down there, spent a few days down there talking to people. Like, they've made it abundantly clear. Like, they're not doing a Kevin Durant deal. They're not doing a deal just for the sake of doing it. They want Devin Booker. Like, that's the guy they want. That's the 20-something they see fitting into their core of a bunch of 20-somethings. So when this season ends, and it's going to end either at best with a loss in the play-in tournament, at worst, you're 11 to 12 in the conference standings. When this season ends, there's going to be a come-to-Jesus moment here, because Durant's going to go. Bradley Beal's not, because nobody wants him and he can't be traded. But Devin Booker, you have to have a serious conversation about this, don't you? Like, you have to discuss trying to get some of that draft capital back from the Houston Rockets, or dealing him somewhere else and getting a whole bunch of other draft picks back, because this is not a team that is one tweak away from being a championship contender. They made that tweak this offseason. They changed the coach. They brought in Tyus Jones as the point guard. That has not made one lick of difference with this group. They are worse this year than they were last year. So I don't know. Like, I think all this Devin Booker messaging about he's not going anywhere, they're building around him long-term, I'm not buying it at all. Are you?
Look, if you're the Suns, I actually understand wanting to say, we are drawing the line. We are not trading Devin Booker, because what are you hoping to get back? A star in his late 20s who can play as well as Devin Booker? Well, you have one of those guys already. So I get it from the Suns' perspective, why they may actually be serious about we're not dealing Devin Booker. Who else would you want to build around? He is your homegrown star that your fans love, and he sells tickets, and he is of a caliber of player. I mean, in France this summer, I got to tell you, I was at the Olympics. He was a big part of those games. And Steve Kerr even said afterward, he was the unsung MVP. Devin Booker is the guy you want to be the anchor of your franchise. So I actually think they're serious. They don't want to trade him. I think if you're Devin Booker, though, you march into those offices after the season ends and say, you have got to get me out of here. And I know that Devin is not the kind of guy who wants to sit and demand a trade. And I know that it's difficult in a market and a place where you have grown up. And I know that it is difficult to do, quote, to the fans or to have that on your reputational blotter for the rest of your career that you, quote, demanded a trade. But it's not his fault at this point. And I think this is almost a situation where if you're a Suns fan, the franchise has really screwed him over with the moves that they've made over the last few years. We've talked about it ad nauseum, the quote new owner syndrome of Matt Ishbia, and how, like so many before him, he came and made a rash series of franchise altering moves. Now, nobody, by the way, everybody else in the league should thank the Mavericks, because now nobody looks as bad as the guy who traded away Luka Doncic, but still, they made moves in this franchise that basically took what had been a promising team, a team that reached the NBA Finals, and turned it into what we see before us. And I think Devin has every right to go in there and say, you know what? I am in my prime. And this is not a situation where I can get back to a finals and try to win. And I deserve the chance to try to do that. And he does, by the way. And I think there are a ton of places. He would be a great fit in Houston, as you point out. He could go to Detroit. I mean, there's all kinds of places that he could go. And if I'm Book, I am going in there and saying, this has been great, guys, but you decided, you made this series of domino decisions that got us here. And I think it's almost becomes a Kevin Garnett in Minnesota situation where if he wants to spend the next 4 years from age 28 to 32 somewhere where he could actually win a title, it's not going to be Phoenix, to your point. So if I'm the Suns, I don't want to deal him because I don't think I'm getting anyone back as good. And I don't think I'm getting anyone back who is beloved by my fans who will sell as many tickets. But if I'm Book, I'm going in there and saying, you need to get me out of here. I'm asking for a trade. Because it's time. It's time for him to go play somewhere else. And again, it's not his fault. This is not a loyalty issue. I really just don't see it that way. At some point, players can't sit there in the front row and watch their front office make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision and be expected to just still be waving the pom-poms. I don't see it.
No, look, the blame for this and what's happened in Phoenix falls squarely on the shoulders of Matt Ishbia. It's as simple as that. Now, I've seen some attempts by some reporters to rewrite history in the last few weeks that Matt Ishbia didn't have as much to do with the Durant deal as has been widely reported, including by me. Like, yes, he did. Like, Matt Ishbia got control of that team and pushed that deal through by basically giving the Nets exactly what they wanted. Like, he was the driving force behind that. He was the driving force. Bradley Beal, like this whole,
and then
yes, and then you double down on this antiquated notion of how to build a team by going and getting a nearly 30-year-old two guard who's never won anything with a no trade clause attached to his contract on a max deal,
like cannibalizing your bench. And I mean, there's so many things wrong. I almost can forgive the Durant thing. It's Kevin Durant. And,
yes.
and I do think there are moments where you just say, it's Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's available. We wanted Kevin Durant on our team, and Kevin Durant back then, as opposed to even Kevin Durant at his age now. But the Beal thing, it was a rash decision with Durant. And if you do something like that, you're going to have to be meticulously careful afterward. And they were the opposite of that. And again, if I'm Book, I'm saying, this has been great. I'm sorry to have to do this, but I got to go.
There's no, I just don't, like, you can't see a pathway for them to make a minor move and get into even the middle of the playoff pack. Like, they're getting older by the year. Durant's going to be 37 next year. Beal approaching his mid-30s. Booker's still young, but like, you're still limited with what you can do in each offseason by the mechanics of the collective bargaining agreement. You fire Frank Vogel, which looks like dumber and dumber by the day. Like,
I mean, I'm gonna sit there, and I have said nothing but that since the moment they got rid of him. And it's not because, the coach was not the problem. No, the coach was not the problem in Phoenix.
Last year, and I've said this before on the show, but last year they were 13th in the NBA in defensive efficiency. That was a David Copperfield-like, magic act by Frank Vogel to get this team in the upper half of the NBA in defensive efficiency. Right now, with largely the same team, they are 27th in defensive efficiency. They don't stop anybody. Here's Stan Van Gundy on the broadcast for Turner the other night. They called the Suns defense pathetic. Called it pathetic.
I mean,
wild. Like there's no effort being put in there. So like it wasn't the coach. It's not really the individual players. It's that this is a poorly constructed roster. It just is, with no hope of getting to a championship level. So yeah, Kevin Durant is there's probably going to be an auction of sorts, like for where Kevin Durant is going to go. But if you're the Suns, you're Devin Booker, you have got to have a serious conversation about this team's future, because why would you bring him back on a team that will have to fight tooth and nail just to make the play-in? Like, why
again,
would you?
if I'm the Phoenix front office, I actually don't think it's smoke and mirrors. I might make the decision to keep Book because, again, you've got factors like ticket sales, you've got sponsors, you've got other things going on that might factor into that decision. If I'm Book and none of that money goes into my pocket, I would definitely be requesting a trade. And by the way, Frank Vogel, who I have not spoken to since, I don't know, I want to say November, early December, whenever Dallas was here in Los Angeles, not this most recent time, but the time before. So I don't know his thinking. This is only my opinion. Can you imagine being Frank Vogel and having had this job in Phoenix and have management completely screw it up, and then going to Dallas to be an assistant coach and have management just completely screw it up again? He's a really good coach. Can we get this man to be a coach, either at the head coach or assistant level on a team with a good front office? I think he deserves that. That's what I think.
Fortunately, with Dallas, he's basically just like a coaching consultant, so he can do his
thing
from Manhattan Beach and collect his.
It's a rough.
He's got, I think, 2 more years left on his contract with the Suns. Like, he's still collecting north of $5 million per year on that deal. Now you got Mike Budenholzer. Like, do you fire Mike Budenholzer after this? Like, he just signed him to, what was it, a 5-year deal at like $50 million? Like, you just gave him a pile of money. Like,
who are you going to get? I mean, whenever we have, and you and I will get into the fire the coach discussions, in the next month or whatever it is, we'll be having this discussion about it. Unfortunately, if you guys around the league, and you'll hear me say over and over, fire the coach. The question is, who are you getting instead? Because if you can't come up with a better alternative, obviously continuity is a factor. So with Mike Budenholzer, who's not a bad NBA coach, we've seen him win a title. Could you get someone better? Probably. Is that person available? I don't know. We'll have to see who's available and what they might do there and who the team is going to be and who's the best fit for that kind of team. But look, again, if I'm Book, I'm out.
The top priority has to be getting your draft capital back from Houston. Like, it has to be, because if you're going to be bad, and being bad is inevitable, now it's just degrees of bad. Are you mediocre or are you awful? Like, if you're going to be in that range, you sure as hell better have your draft capital. And the only way to do that is to do a deal with Houston. And I promise you, the only guy the Rockets want is Devin Booker. That's the only guy.
But that's it. I mean, but that's the thing. Again, if I'm Devin Booker, I'm asking out. So if you're in that situation and you're forced to trade him, yes, Houston makes the most sense for everyone. It makes the most sense for Houston. It makes the most sense for Phoenix. It makes the most sense for Book, by the way. It's a great team. If you add him to that team, and again, you just spent time there with Amen Thompson and the whole group, like how? I mean, that's a contender, man. That's a team
they
that
just
want to tango with.
They need somebody getting buckets at the end of games. And look, Jalen Green is going to continue to develop. Amen Thompson's going to continue to develop. But they've got, like, assuming they don't have to break up that core, which I don't think they're going to do either. Like, they have no interest in blowing up this roster to get anybody.
No, but if you're Phoenix, you want your picks back, and you'll get
your picks, and like you still have, you can do the Fred VanVleet part of all this. Like, is a team option on that contract. Like, they still want to keep VanVleet, but he's probably the most likely to go there. But you add Devin Booker to Thompson, to Dylan Brooks, to Jabari Smith,
Ime Udoka, who I think could maximize.
That's another thing.
Seen yet?
That's another thing. Like, Ime Udoka is one of the best assets the Rockets have, because a lot of players want to play for him. Like, he's a no bullshit guy that a lot of players love. And Kevin Durant, I think, would love to play for him. He had him in Brooklyn as an assistant coach that 1 year. Ime thrived in Boston. He has thrived. Like, he kicks the crap out of guys. Like, talking to some of those guys down there this week, like, some of the things he says to them, it's mean. It's kind of bordering on mean, but it works. It works. And I think guys, there's like a gravitational pull for that type of coach. So he's a huge asset for them, and I think he'd be someone Devin Booker would want to play for as well. All right, Rachel, always appreciate your time. Welcome back to the mainland after your luxurious work trip, and we'll reconvene here next week.